people like Grameen Bank teaming up with, I can't remember who it was it Nestle? I can't remember. Danone, actually creating a company to try and feed people in Bangladesh, and they're doing it not really to make money, they're doing it more of a sort of, I mean, it's got a real sort of purposeful agenda to it. That's the sort of thing that would happen in this world. And yeah, I think people would be very, very fond of that. A little bit of science and technology involved in this, but probably not a lot. I mean, in terms of climate change, probably the main thing you'd be doing here is, I love the term negawatts, which is basically energy efficiency with a flashy name. Just getting smarter about, not wasting it, basically. Don't use a washing machine, a dryer, you stick it on the line kind of thing. We just need to sort of, an element of going backwards to go forwards. I do happen to quite like this one as well, actually. This is the very sort of sciencey one, obviously. If you go further enough out, this gets wonderful. I mean, space solar, wonderful idea. There's a lot of sun in space, there's no clouds. So you stick a load of collecting dishes up there, you grab it, you beam it back down to Earth. The Japanese are looking at this. Incredibly complicated, yes. Incredibly expensive, yes. Impossible, no. I don't necessarily think that's impossible. All sorts of solutions, like there was a guy, I think he was an architect, had the idea of just having these huge sailing ships going around the world, spraying seawater into the air to create condensation, to create cloud, which is kind of like fine, but what are the consequences of that? Putting, I think it's iron and other nutrients into the ocean to create more algae. I think algae, currently, about 45% of emissions are absorbed through algae in our oceans, and we could actually increase that. Obviously, the problem, though, is you get this rather slimy green sea and you kill a load of fish. So everything has a sort of a reaction to it, effectively. We could have a sort of some kind of mirrored shield in space reflecting things back. A slightly more enoughist solution to this is we just paint everything white. LA white. It really does look like the City of Angels, and it becomes more reflective. Although, and that's a great logical, and it would work, but there's not actually that much inhabitation on the Earth. There's not many buildings, so you're really fiddling around the edges. You're not going to do anything massively different there. This is the land of sort of biofuels to some extent. Really smart renewables, geothermal energy, domestic energy dashboards. Why haven't we got those yet? I mean, they're coming, but so you can actually look at real time of where your energy is being used. You could start pricing energy in a real time basis. Get really, really smart about how a home consumes energy. Essentially, the sort of dashboard a very, very large company would have in their office block or factory at the moment, but on a sort of domestic level. All of that sort of lovely sort of sciencey stuff. I'm just going to have a look here. What else have we got here? I mean, the whole carbon sequestration, I can never say that word, sequestration, converting coal into natural gas, which I think cuts out about 60% of emissions, which a company called Greenpoint Energy is looking at the moment. What else are we talking about here? There's this lovely idea. There's an Australian scientist who's looking at the possibility of using bacteria from kangaroo stomachs and introducing that into animal feed to feed the cows to cut out the cow farts. Because obviously, I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, there's some people saying, well, to cut emissions, we just got to stop eating meat. Well, yeah, that's one solution. Another solution might be, use science to actually stop the methane, stop the CO2 emissions from cattle kind of thing. So that's another way of dealing with that. I think that's sort of more or less it, really. I mean, the other thing, just getting back to that anxiety thing, we have, to some extent, been here before. In the 1700s, depending if you want to sort of start getting creative with your words, you could say we had peak wood in this country. It was a wood-based global economy, more or less. It was housing material, building material. You built ships with it. It was pretty much the only fuel apart. We had sperm whale cutting at one point, but that got really expensive. It was getting really, really expensive because urbanization was taking land. We had to sort of clear fields for agriculture and so on and so forth. So wood was getting really, really expensive. And my reading of the situation, and this could be completely wrong, but my understanding of it is in a sort of small way, the hugely expensive cost of wood to some extent created the deep coal mining industry. People knew it was there, but couldn't quite work out how to get it out. It was too costly to get out, but as soon as wood hit a certain price, it started making sense. And they had this, other problems around sort of sperm whale oil. So I think there's a real willingness to do some of this stuff, but we almost need a sort of more of a crisis to happen before we actually do anything. I mean, I think it's going to get really interesting when oil hits 200 or 300 a barrel. And it's currently, about 74 today. things start breaking down quite badly when oil hits 200. And I don't think it's a question of whether, it's a question of when. And it's as soon as we get the global economy powering ahead again, if we do, which I think we will, and China is growing up something 10-15% or something, all of that is going to kick through. And that, you know, Tesco's supply chain is a mess when oil's that expensive. You can still use ships to move things around, but transporting anything by aeroplane starts looking extremely expensive. Road transport gets looking extremely expensive. And the consequence might be a relocalization of consumption and production. And actually that's back almost to your in office world. That's actually potentially quite pleasant. It's where it was 100 years ago, and we'll go back to that world, which could be quite good. And I think just to sort of, yeah, this is the point really on this whole sort of science thing. We've had huge problems before. We've had world wars, we've had, you know, used nuclear weapons, we've had pandemics and black deaths and all the rest of it, and we've somehow always come through. We are incredibly resilient, and we are incredibly creative and ingenious. And I think we will solve this problem. I mean, if you want, there was a great article in, can't remember where, and it was sort of a humorous article, but it was actually based on a bit of logic. And this guy was saying, how can you have an energy crisis? And he's talking more about resource shortages more than climate change specifically, but how can you have an energy crisis when you have a universe that's made up of pretty much nothing but energy? The Earth is bathed in so much energy. I mean, there is so much energy hitting the Earth that it's pulling the water up on every beach in the world twice a day. We've got volcanoes creating islands, that amount of energy. We've got earthquakes destroying cities, that amount of energy. Half the world is bathed in pretty good sunlight for half the year, or for 12 hours a day. You know, the problem isn't so much a shortage of energy, it's a shortage of imagination, quite frankly. I mean, it's ridiculous that we're still driving around in these tin boxes, these cars, with an internal combustion engine, which is so energy inefficient, it's unbelievable. You know, you'd have think if we could actually get people sort of going to the moon and back safely, in most cases, you know, we should actually be able to invent something a little bit more interesting than that. And I think we are on the cusp, because of the necessity being the mother of invention, of some extraordinary breakthroughs in all sorts of areas, in terms of, you know, new energy forms, new transport forms, you know, finding ways to solve climate change or adapt to it. So I am relentlessly optimistic. Now, that's not to say we haven't got problems. I think it could get quite nasty for a period. There could be quite a bottleneck where we have rapid population growth, declining resources or very expensive resources, and some fairly severe climate change consequences. But I do genuinely think that ultimately we'll get through it. We are not sort of about to become extinct or anything like that. Thank you very much.